On the internet, nobody knows you're a dog. This is a profound comic from 1993 that really highlights the interesting nature of the internet. It adds a layer of anonymity that the real world doesn't. This anonymity creates spaces where people can explore their identity, form connections, and share parts of themselves they might never reveal offline. I recently just finished Serial Experiments Lain, and it was incredible. It's probably the most thought-provoking anime I've ever seen. Serial Experiments Lain is a psychological horror about isolation and the nightmarish effects of being chronically online. It's super interpretive and insanely powerful, especially considering that it came out in 1998. The main character, Lain, is a 14-year-old girl that becomes increasingly more involved in the online space known as the Wired, that slowly consumes her. The themes from the show were beyond fascinating to me, and I urge anyone who loves interesting and interpretive art to check it out. While watching it, I couldn't help but relate it to the real-world equivalents that the show predicted. The show explores how the internet can affect things in the real world and the consequences of always being online. As the show progresses, Lain slowly loses touch with reality, and the boundaries between the online space and the real world become blurred. Similarly, in my last video, I talked about the tale of Taya 777 and the art of the internet checkpoint. In it, I described that people are oftentimes willing to share things online that they probably couldn't share with the people around them in real life, and how important this outlet must be for so many people. Taya 777 and Lain are both two sides of the same coin. Taya's positive portrayal and Lain's cautionary tale just show how complex the idea of internet anonymity can be, and what people choose to do with it. While one story highlights the internet's power to bring people together, the other warns of the risks of losing oneself in the process. I have two zines I've picked up from Zine Fest in 2019 that explore this idea even further. If you don't know what a zine is, it's a small, self-published booklet that usually contains art, poems, stories, sometimes reviews of music, anything really. One zine I have here is called Human Eyes by Josie Serrano, and the other is called Nobody Knows You're a Dog by Adrienne Belms. In Josie's story, she explains, "Flickering screens were the best thing I had when I was young. They were gateways into quiet imagination. Endless discoveries were out there, you just had to find them. It was hard for me to feel at home anywhere else. IRL, I felt perpetually embarrassed, unable to make real connections as my true self." Human Eyes is a super interesting story about gender identity and self-discovery, and the early sections really highlight just how important these online spaces are. They were a place for her to escape the constraints of the physical world and explore her identity without fear of judgment. Nobody Knows You're a Dog by Adrienne Belms is a collection of stories and poems about the effects of internet anonymity. There's loads of interesting stuff in here, but what really takes the cake is a beautiful story by Kat Giordano. The story is titled That's Cereal, Honey. It's a beautiful memory that fully conveys how complex this topic can be. It's a story about a 13-year-old girl who falls in love with a boy named Koji over MapleStory. She meets him one summer, and she spends loads of time talking to him and his friends. I'll summarize some of it and express why it's so important to me. When I met Koji on a boat traveling between MapleStory continents one summer afternoon, I was more thrilled than perhaps was appropriate. Sure, I was just playing a video game alone in the nook of my parents' living room, but communicating with someone else immediately galvanized it for me. Of course, it wasn't long before I made him my boyfriend. They seemed to hit it off and played together for most of the summer. I used to send him poems that I wrote, and he pretended to understand what I meant, and we both pretended that either of us knew anything about poetry. I found that even that mostly shallow sort of interaction made me feel less alone than most people I knew in meat space. Once he messaged me to let me know he'd written a poem about me on a Taco Bell napkin and typed it up for me in the game chat. For years I had it memorized, and I kept it close to me because for years it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done in my honor. I have it scrawled in the front of an old diary from middle school that I pull out from time to time just to laugh at it because it's fucking hilarious. Just wishful thinking, the girl whose mere grunts form poems. That's cereal, honey. For every word that spills from her lips, my heart fills like a pool at the bottom of a waterfall. To be fair, I think this was an inside joke of ours, though I don't remember the context, which I'm sure was also stupid. After playing games and being with each other for a few months, they really started to bond with each other. But as Kat explains, then he went on vacation. It would only be for a week, he explained, and he would be back online as soon as he got home, but none of that mattered to me. I was already crushed, already abandoned. Apparently, a week turned to weeks, and then weeks turned to months. but eventually he did reappear. Despite all of the angst it entailed, I don't remember exactly how long his absence lasted. Only that at some point during my 8th grade year, he reappeared and explained that he had contracted Lyme disease on a family trip to the Presque Isle, and then he fell out of the routine of playing. He eventually did come back, and they even shared AIM usernames so he could keep in contact with her. Even if they weren't playing the game, but the spark that was there before had long gone, and Koji had moved on to other things. Then, at some point, he interrupted the conversation to let me know he had met a girl in school, and that he wanted to ask her out. Whatever still remained between us was done. I said something like, "Yeah, me too," even though that wasn't remotely true. As years had gone by, she eventually lost touch with Koji until she decided to randomly add him on Facebook 5 years later. To my surprise, he accepted my request, and we caught up over the course of a couple days. We're mutuals on Instagram, and I think about 6 months ago, he told me one of my outfits, camo shirt, orange jacket, combat boots, looked nice. Finally, she ends off her story with a really beautiful final paragraph that captures the bittersweet connection they shared. Sometimes he'll DM me or Snapchat me a video of himself listening to the all too familiar MapleStory soundtrack, panning over to the grin on his face. And in those moments, it feels like we're sharing something special, certainly generationally unique, but also unique to us, an acute nostalgia over something that's both universal and completely obscure. A connection so small and so fleeting it almost aches, like we're touching hands through a thick pane of glass. This ending perfectly encapsulates the complicated and interesting nature of internet anonymity and how it affects people. Kat and Koji's relationship was able to come about because of it, but it's also what made it easy to fade, leaving behind only burning memories and fleeting nostalgia. Kat's experience shows us just how interesting these online spaces can be. They allow us to be vulnerable, connect deeply with others, but we are also reminded just how fragile these connections can be. Growing up with the internet definitely shaped who I am and who so many others are today. For people like me, who were more reserved in person, it was a gateway to creativity, discovery, and connection. A place where we could express ourselves in a way that we might not have been able to otherwise. While those connections were often fleeting, they left behind memories that are both beautiful and bittersweet, reminding us of the internet's unique role in shaping our identities. I reached out to Kat to see if I could share her story. She gave me permission and was super nice. Kat is an amazing writer that has loads of stuff to read. If you like what you heard here, go check out her stuff. I'll leave a link in the description to her socials as well as Josie's. Also, it took some digging, but the zine Nobody Knows You're a Dog is actually still up and available for purchase too. It's a really beautiful collection of stories and poems that I'll make sure to link to as well. As always, the best way to support the channel is through the Etsy shop. I have a few more sticker designs that should be up by now. If you haven't already, make sure to check them out. Thank you for watching.